My name is Nikki Hamblin. I'm an Olympian and a member of the ITA Education team. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this month's webinar, where we will discuss proactive reporting of doping in sport, an athlete-centric approach. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are in the world. Before we start, please do briefly allow me to do some housekeeping. We are delivering this webinar in 5 languages. On your Zoom menu, you should see a button called Interpretation. By clicking on this icon, you can select a channel with your preferred language. I will be presenting the session in English, but you can also listen to the audio in Arabic, French, Russian, or Spanish. Today's webinar is part of our educational monthly series that are publicly available and designed to tackle key anti-doping topics and to raise clean sport awareness. As for all our sessions, it goes without saying that while we encourage debate, interaction, and your questions, we do not tolerate any kind of aggressive behavior or abusive or racist language. We trust you'll all join us in the spirit of fairness, respect, and integrity. Some other housekeeping points. As many of you are already, please do use the chat function to tell us the sport you are representing. And so just to give a shout out to a few people who've already said hi in the chat. So hello back to you in Qatar. Hello to the fencing athlete from Malaysia. Hello to you in South Africa, Sierra Leone, Fiji. I think I saw Dragon Boat from Philippines, India, and Brazil. It's great to have you all with us today. Also, just a reminder that you can use the Q&A function to ask us a question during the session, as we have left some time at the end to answer these. And finally, just a note that we do record all our webinars so we can make them available on our website and YouTube channel for those who are not able to attend the session live. As always, it is my pleasure to give a shout out to our official presenting partner, Inform Sport. Their investment allows us to deliver the webinar program free of charge in 5 different languages. Inform Sport is a global certification program for supplements that batch tests products for substances prohibited in sport. As supplement contamination continues to be one of the leading causes of inadvertent doping, we encourage athletes and athlete support personnel to check all products before use at sport.wetestYoutrust.com. The ITA is proud to be recognised by UNESCO as a leading international organisation for the delivery of anti-doping programs. And this educational webinar is delivered with the support of the UNESCO International Convention Against Doping in Sport. So, what is this webinar about today? To set the scene, did you know that based on statistics from the World Anti-Doping Agency, 98.75% of anti-doping rule violations, also known as ADRVs for short, involved athletes? This means that only 1.25% of ADRVs are tied to athlete support personnel. Yet experience tells us that athletes rarely dope alone. Clean sport and the protection of athletes relies on us together as a community working to rid our sport of those who drive doping. One of the ways which we can do this is through proactive reporting of big and small pieces of information to those in a position to do something about it, such as my colleagues in the ITA Intelligence and Investigation Department and others in the same role in different organizations. However, we do acknowledge that proactive reporting is not easy and it is a complex issue. As research by Dr. Kelsey Erickson, who is an ITA Education Expert Group member, has shown, reporting presents a true moral dilemma. In this moral dilemma, there are 2 equally demanding and valid moral options. Once an athlete becomes aware of doping, they have a decision to make. On the one hand, they can report the doping, which is what we ask and expect them to do. that ensures clean sport for other athletes. But on the other hand, someone in the position to report is likely thinking whether they want to protect the person who is involved in the doping. This moral dilemma is one of the barriers to proactive reporting, but today we're going to try and move the balance just a little bit by discussing how we can create and foster a culture where athletes and other members of the sport community are more willing and confident to report what they have seen, heard, know, or suspect. And with that intro, I would like to welcome today's panelists and invite Toby Atkins and Nicholas Raudenski to turn on their cameras and offer them a warm welcome. So Toby is a former professional cyclist with first-hand experience of proactive reporting, which he will tell us a bit more about in a moment. He is an advocate for athletes, focusing on education and the development of structures which allow athletes to compete in a safe and fair environment. He is an ITA Education Expert Group member and an ITA Education Ambassador. So some of you may have met Toby as he does travel the world delivering clean sport education at many different sport events. Hi Toby, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Mickey. It is fantastic to be here. It's always an absolute honour to be on these kind of things. So looking forward to having some productive discussions today.
Thanks, Toby. It's an honour to have someone who's had experiences like you have on our webinar willing to share your story to help others. And our second panelist today, Nick. So Nick is the ITA's Head of Intelligence and Investigations. In the world of sporting integrity, Nick has been both UEFA's Integrity Officer and FIFA's Integrity Manager prior to joining the ITA. Before moving to Europe, you'll be able to tell from his accent where he's from. Nick spent 13 years working in law enforcement, including at the US Department of Homeland Security across a number of roles, including as a criminal investigator, supervisory special agent, and deputy attaché abroad. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nikki. Thanks so much for having us. And first of all, thanks to everybody that's joining us from all over the world. And thanks so much for giving more time to this very important topic. I think we all look forward to, as Toby said, having an open and honest discussion about where we're at with confidential reporting.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So this session is designed to be interactive, and we would like to hear from you as much as possible. The chat box is open. The Q&A is open. We have a poll question, so please do get involved. Creating an athlete-centric approach to proactive reporting and an environment that supports it is not something we can do today in 60 minutes as two panelists and a moderator. It really does need all of our input as a sport community to take steps forward. I would also like to briefly acknowledge that we did receive a lot of questions via the registration form and that we won't be able to get through everything today. We have at least tried to capture the essence of what you've been asking about, but if we don't specifically respond to your question, or if you want to do a follow-up, or if you want to ask it again, you're welcome to pop it in the Q&A for us to get to at the end, or you can email us at education@ita.sport. So some of you may have already met or heard from Toby before and be perhaps somewhat familiar with his story, but I would now like to give the floor to him to share his experience of being a proactive reporter.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Yeah, always great to kick things off with the good stuff. So, guys, I will try and I suppose tell you a little bit about my story, how I ended up doing the things that I do now, and try and put things into perspective with where things were maybe 8 years ago and to where they are now, and then highlight some of the facts that we've still got work to do. So for me, I turned professional at the end of 2014. I lived in New Zealand at the time, and of course, in cycling, the main hub is in Europe. So I moved over to Europe and met my team at their first training camp halfway up a volcano in Sicily. It was a beautiful, beautiful place, absolutely stunning. Over the first few days, I met my teammates and started training very, very hard. So I'd just come off of the Southern Hemisphere racing season. So I was fit and doing well. And I was a sprinter in cycling, so I'm the guy that goes really fast at the end, but I'm not very good at going up hills. And so we were at the training camp, and it turned out that because I'd had a successful racing season in the Southern Hemisphere, I was very, very fit, and I was actually beating the majority of our team up the hills and up the mountains as well, which was really positive, and it meant hopefully my season would be fantastic, which was great. Towards the end of that week, my team manager, who was one of the only people that spoke English, and I can only speak English, sat me down and pushed over some medications across the table and said, "Toby, it's time to take your vitamins or your vitamins." And of course, I'm halfway up a volcano with no phone signal and no means of contacting the outside world, and I was shocked, because to me, this is something we dealt with years ago in the Lance Armstrong era. This was in 2014, 2015. So I was shocked that it was something that was ever even going to be presented to me. I had absolutely no idea what to do, no idea who to speak to, no idea how to speak to people. Do I need to say something? I didn't know what to do as a junior athlete. I didn't particularly trust the UCI, which is the governing body for cycling, because they were so ingrained in some of the problems that we had in cycling in the previous generation. And I didn't know to speak to WADA, and ITA didn't exist back then. So I turned to a family friend, because I didn't know what to do. And that family friend really, really helped me. He actually put me in contact with someone at the UCI, one of the legal team, who was genuinely cared for my well-being, and it seemed like they were going to do something, which was good. So the next day gave the medication or the drugs back to the team manager and said, "No, not doing it. I know what you're doing, and I'm not happy with it." And from that moment, the team manager pulled me into the bathroom and flushed the medication down the toilet and said, "It was all a test. It was all a test." And my mind is going crazy, because these things, you can't believe these things happen in the world of elite sport. And so I reported this to the UCI, and they said they couldn't do anything without any proof. There was nothing they could do. They could only get me out safely. So I focused on that. But before I got out, I said, they need something to happen. I can't walk away from my career and know nothing will happen. And so they said, we need evidence. And so I collected evidence for the UCI, or for the World Anti-Doping Agency, and took photos of everything, and had to sneak around team hotels and team rooms to gather the evidence as an athlete, not as investigations, or not as anyone to do with the system. And that was shocking as an athlete to know that if you want something to happen at that point, you need to do that. And I managed to get out of the country safely. There was a lot of question marks as to what happened. No one really understood why I'd left. There was a lot of secrecy, but I managed to get out, and I was physically okay, but I was emotionally distraught. I hated it. I'd had someone pull away my dream because they wanted me to do something that I wasn't willing to do. And what made it worse was that once I had reported it, I didn't hear from anyone for 6 months. It was silence. I went through depression. I went through drinking a lot, and there was no sign as to what was going to happen. And that's something that's really impacted me to this day. And it's why I'm so passionate about really driving change in this, because things definitely aren't like that now, but we're definitely not in the place of it being perfect either. And so that's essentially why I do what I do, because I don't want people to go through that same horrible experience that I had to go through. Interestingly as well, it's something that a lot of people find very interesting, is that my career wasn't negatively affected by it in the end. I became a spokesperson about it. I spoke openly in the media, and wanted to drive change with it. And I very much expected, if I do this in public, there's a big possibility that my career in cycling is over. And that wasn't the case. Every contract I had for the following 4 or 5 years came down to the fact that the image that a team wanted was to be tied to someone with that strong, clean sport, clean moral background. And that's a really powerful thing to know, that I think that your career can actually flourish from this. It's not necessarily over. And that's something I really try and drive home to athletes as well. So guys, that's a little bit about my history and why we're here and why it's such an important topic to discuss and improve the system as well. So I'll leave that to kind of to settle with you guys. I'll invite Nikki back on and we'll move on to the next stage of today's session.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Toby, for acknowledging that it was a really hard thing to do. And there was obvious, you talked about, I guess, some of the risks that you faced, and, you know, being a proactive reporter. And as you said, you could have just walked away and left, or you could have, you know, followed the team way potentially. So now we had this question came in from the audience via the registration form, and the question was, what do you think you achieved by reporting? So given it wasn't easy, given the risk, given the medium to long-term consequences, some of them negative, although many of them positive, I guess, what did you achieve? Would you do it again? What advice can you give to anyone who is maybe finding themselves in a similar situation to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge question and has so many answers. So I'm going to touch on a few different elements and we'll try pick it apart a little bit as well. So I think the first thing to really realize is that what the answer was to that at the time and what the answer is to it now is two very different things. I look at it now from a sense of I protected my sport that I love and all the athletes in it. It's something that as a sport, everyone has, you know, the reason they do that sport is for the love of it. You know, we don't get into sport because it's going to pay the mortgage. We get into sport because we love it. And absolutely, cycling has a very dark past. And the word emeritus springs to mind quite often in these kinds of conversations. And it's not like that anymore in cycling. I can only speak for cycling. I don't have experience in other sports. But I personally felt a responsibility to my sport and my fellow athletes, because you race with these people every day of the year or 250 days of the year. You feel a responsibility to help them, to help the sport, and to keep what we do real. And things don't change in sport unless you genuinely stand up for something. And that's something I believe from a personal aspect through my normal day-to-day life. You know, if you don't stand up for something, well, then what do you actually stand for? And for me, the way I was brought up was, you know, honesty, integrity, and there's the values that you'd expect just as a clean sport kind of advocate. That's the kind of people we want in around our normal lives and as an athlete. And that's what I wanted to portray in my sporting career. I didn't want to have to explain to my kids in 15 years' time that actually everything I achieved was fake. I didn't want to have to live with that. At the time, the reason was very different. I was spiteful. The team manager put me in a position where he was throwing my career away. I was angry. I wasn't a happy person. He put me in a position where I had to choose either my personal morals or my career, and that's hard. You know, as someone that's worked their entire life to get to that point, to then have someone go, if you don't do this, you're not going to have it. That is hard to deal with. And I said no. If I said no and walked away, people would just assume that I quit. People would know me as a quitter. And I wasn't going to be someone that you just got thrown away to the side and got thought of as a quitter. And if they were going to do it to me, I wasn't going to let someone get away with it either. Right? There was this, if you're going to risk my career, I'm sure as anything going to make sure you have some form of repercussion to this as well. It's not fair. And so that's essentially a large part of why I spoke out, was that I don't want to be the one that is left high and dry, and then this other person be actually the start of all of this, and and have the final say. So I spoke out a lot because I wanted something to happen. And I'm a big believer of, if you don't say anything, like I said, like if you don't speak out about something, nothing will change. And it is a hard thing to do, but I would certainly do it again. I would 100% speak out about things again. It's an interesting question I actually get asked a lot is, did you ever think about taking it? And I was like, I'm very open about the sense of absolutely. Of course, every athlete has had moments of thinking, oh, I could do this. But when it comes back to it, when you've really got to think, make a decision and think deeply about it, it's like you fall back onto the right thing. And I suppose that's essentially, I wanted to push my sport forward and not be falling back to what it was 15 years ago. And I couldn't sleep at night if I didn't do that. I wouldn't think I was a great person. And like I say, in the end, it actually benefited my career by speaking out, being public about it, and really being relatively big in the media about it, and saying the things that needed to be said. Actually, really, pushed my career a long way as well. So yeah, hopefully that kind of explains the question. Like I say, there's so many different answers for it, but yeah, it's a combination of all of those things, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more we talk about it, the more we have conversations about it, the more we understand that there are just so many intricacies to it. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing the emotions that went along with your journey as well. I think that's super interesting and super powerful, I hope, to this community to really kind of get people excited about getting involved, and as you said, Toby, like make a difference, doing the right thing. What values do we prioritize in what we do?
Absolutely.
So I would now like to ask Nick to turn his camera back on. Perhaps we can pop the question back on the screen, because I would like to go back to the question in terms of what do you think has been achieved by reporting, and because I know Nick has some things that he'd like to share about what perhaps has been achieved by reporting from a system point of view. So Nick, over to you to share your thoughts, share your perspectives from someone who's embedded day to day in this area.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nikki, and to Toby for the phenomenal sharing of that story. And I think Toby hit it perfectly. It's as big as the question mark that's on the screen. I mean, what has really changed in the past couple of years? And if I can ask the colleagues to go to the next slide, I would just like to walk a few things from my perspective. And as we might have mentioned, this is the third in a series of webinars about this topic. And I really took time to go back to listen to Toby's story to the ITA webinar about 2 years ago from 2021, and I really sat with the question. And if you look over it, it's a phenomenal slide, and Toby's speaking about what is changing and what still needs to change. And I really took time to think about that in the context as to where are we today? What has changed? Are we doing anything better? And what do we still need to do? And a few reflective ideas came that I wanted to share with the audience and with all the experts that are joining us from around the world. The thing that I think that we need to focus on is increasing and restoring the trust in organizations. I think Toby shared a problem that he and probably many other athletes face in who do I turn to? And so, we really continue to focus on increasing and trying to restore trust in the organizations as an independent organization and as somebody who wants to do something about fighting against doping in sport. And the second point is sort of a very interesting observation. We noticed an increase in reporting after the ITA would issue a sanction or provide a press release about sanctioned athletes or athlete support personnel. And I have a specific case in mind where the ITA published information about a sanction in a new sport or in a new country that we weren't operating in so much. But after that came an influx in reporting that showed that the people that are out there that are observing what's happening in sports are paying attention, and they're looking for avenues as to how can this change. And the fact that the ITA was willing to take action, that they did show the community that they were trying to make changes. Maybe it's as small as one sanction at a time, but that we were able to demonstrate that when you do more cases, this leads to more trust. You're seen as somebody that's contributing as a solution. And this immediately led to more proactive reporting. It led to a situation where more people were coming forward because they realized that we aim to do something about cleaning up the sport. And I have a slide that follows this about the increase in reporting, but it's very clear that there's still a lot that needs to be done. And so what I don't want from today's discussion is for us to collectively agree that everything's perfect and that the whole system is without its challenges, but really use this as a springboard and use this as a next opportunity for us to still focus on how much work that there is to do. If you could put the next slide on for me. As I mentioned, we have received a significant amount of increased reporting year on year, and Reveal, our proactive reporting and confidential reporting platform, has experienced an overwhelming amount of increased reports since its launch in February 2021. And now, I don't think that reporting is just about a number. It's really about the quality of reports that have come through. So we can rest on our laurels and be very happy and proud that more people are reporting, that we're receiving more confidential reports, but it's really the quality of people that are coming forward to provide information and to do so in a trusted, secure, and confidential manner. And so if you can go to the next slide for me. There's many that are on this webinar that are sports administrators, and we received this question in the webinar registration, and I just want to speak to it real briefly as to what can be done from this perspective. And it seems very simple, but the best recommendation that I can make in terms of having a policy is to actually have one. Have one that's written down, have one that outlines what you're going to do and who's going to do what with the report. Sometimes it helps to outline these things and to write it down. For anybody that's looking for guidance documents, we'll be sure to share the new proactive reporter policy that the ITA is issuing now. But also make sure that you have experts that are significantly trained or experienced in handling this report. And now I don't assume that everybody, as Toby said, he's an athlete, he's not an investigator. I don't assume that everybody will have the experience in order to handle these sources of information. But why I recommend this is really relying on the expertise that some of the, for example, ITA experts within the I&I department have. They are very well experienced and very well trained in how to handle confidential information as well as how to talk to people in a human capacity. What we want to avoid, of course, is that any reporting mechanism just goes into a general inbox, that anybody across the organization can get access to it, that any day of the week, maybe it's a receptionist, maybe it's the janitor, maybe it's anybody across the organization that would review and process this information. And what we're trying to do is avoid that happens. And the one significant point that I do want to mention is really changing the focus on proactive reporting. I think there's a lot of recommendations out there that show that there should be a reporting mechanism in place, whether it's an email address, whether it's a telephone number, whether it's an online reporting mechanism. But then from the sports perspective, we think, okay, job done. There's nothing more that I really need to focus on. And look, we've had hundreds of reports every year. But really changing that mindset to the start of an intelligence process, the start of a potential case that we need to pursue, the start of a new potential active and well-placed source of information that has access and has direct knowledge of what's happening in the sport. And so we really have to change the mindset a little bit on changing from a tick box and a compliance perspective that I have to do this, so I'm going to do it, to what can this do for us? How can this lead us to more cases? I said on the bottom, and anything that's important, you have to put in red across the bottom of the slide, of course. But this is a means to an end. It's not the end itself. And those were just some examples that I wanted to share as to not only where we were a few years ago, but as well as to speak to some of the administrators that are on the webinar today, looking at what do we do and how do we continue to move forward in this area.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Thanks for the advice that you provided and for the overview of perhaps where we were compared to where we are now. So now we're going to break down or look at some of the specific barriers that we've identified to reporting in a moment. But before we do, there is a question, another question from the audience, which perhaps Nick and Toby, I might ask you both to offer your perspectives on. Nick, so maybe first to you. I do understand that a lot of reporting is anonymous, so you don't know who these people are. But are there any common threads between those who do decide to report, who decide to use the, go to the platform, enter some information and click submit? Like, is there anything common about them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an excellent question, obviously, and one that we decided when we wanted everybody to talk about a little bit. But for me, the common thread in many reports that we see is the trust that they're coming forward to. They're deciding who to trust with this information in many capacities, who to trust their livelihood or their safety and their well-being in the country that they're in the sport that they're in, to come forward and to share with ourselves, with colleagues like WADA, like many of the other stakeholders that have reporting mechanisms. But there's a belief from many of the reporters that something should be done about this, right? And that puts an obligation on us to take this forward. There's a belief and there's a common thread that they want to see clean sport, and that's why they're choosing to come forward. And they believe that they can trust the ITA as an independent organization. The other thing that I'll mention, and certainly you could clearly see from Toby's perspective, that personal integrity. I really want to focus on this moral aspect and this personal integrity that somebody would be asked to do, or somebody came across information that damaged their sport, damaged the credibility or the reputation of their sport that they participate in for many years, that they wake up early in the morning, that they train long, hard hours. And so we really see this attention to a personal integrity that, you heard Toby talk about it. How dare you ask me to do something like this? And now what am I going to do about it? And I think the most important thing is just to make sure that you understand that people are out here and people want to hear this information, and that the ITA is certainly looking to act upon it, and that it's a trusted partner to receive these reports.
Thanks, Nick. And as you said, I mean, a lot of what you've kind of recognized, we heard in Toby's story too. I mean, I took some notes when Toby was talking to us, and Toby, you talked about, you went to someone that you knew who cared for your well-being, and someone that you could trust. So what do you think about this question, perhaps from your experience, but also from interacting with athletes through education initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say my perspective is very much from like a human perspective, because I know a lot of these people personally. And so one thing I can really draw similarities between is that every person I know that has spoken out or has given information to someone has been vulnerable, right? That is absolutely something that every athlete that speaks out is in a vulnerable position. There's a certain level of confusion as to who to speak to, what to say. Am I saying the right thing? Have I actually seen anything wrong, or am I just thought I've seen these things? And also exactly the same as what was just said. Really, the moral dilemma. They've had to decide whether do they stick to their personal morals to speak out and if they've seen something. But there's also the level of, well, is it actually going to harm my sport? Exactly like Nick was saying. They've had to overcome this huge moral dilemma to reach out and speak about these things. And it really boils down, well, at least for me, my perspective is it boils down to every single person that I know that has spoken out has had a level of fear about things, and that's a fear about various different levels of various different things along the process, really. And I'm sure we'll touch on them in a little while's time. But the key thing for me is just how vulnerable these people are when they're speaking out. They've put so much trust into the system, and they've handed that trust onto. I mean, for the ITA, for example, in the Reveal platform and the I&I team, and that's a really big step. So from my perspective, it's more personable.
Thank you. Thank you both for your comments on that. I think, some super interesting things that perhaps can be taken away and considered about how we do this, how we treat athletes, and how we gain their trust. So if you do recall, during our registration for this webinar, in addition to asking if you had any questions for our panelists, we asked you what you thought the barriers to reporting were and what you thought some solutions might be. So thank you to everyone that contributed. So first of all, we're going to look at some of the themes which came through as barriers. So as someone who looked through very closely at all the comments in the registration form, fear was the most mentioned word in terms of barriers to proactive reporting. There were also many other barriers noted, including an awareness, lack of knowledge, confidentiality concerns, and a lack of trust in the system. So what is clear is there's not one barrier, but many different barriers. And the size of the barrier is probably a little bit context dependent. So for example, looking at some of these barriers that were mentioned, the internet availability was mentioned as a barrier. Now, if this was me in a position where I saw something or heard something or knew something and I wanted to report, this wouldn't be a barrier to me. So it really is quite context dependent. So what we've done today is we've looked at these two barriers, all these barriers, sorry, in two different streams. So the first stream is those barriers which are potential consequences to a person if they proactively report. And the second stream is those barriers which, probably in extremely simplified terms, we could reduce by explaining some of the organizational processes around proactive reporting. So breaking down some of the fears related to potential personal consequences, this is what you told us in the registration form. So just to read some of them out, there was fear, there was fear of retaliation, there was the social implications, the threat of harm to the reporter or to others. There was a fear of sanctions and a fear for future careers. And I do have to say, if you think there's anything else that you would like to add to this list, please pop it in the chat. We are happy to address it. Now, I know that Toby has talked about some of these fears, particularly around his, the potential for his career to be over when he did decide to report. But perhaps, Toby, you would like to discuss a few more of these now and perhaps break some of them down for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, these were all things that you've physically put in, and these are all things that you guys have come up with. It's surprising. Well, you've hit the nail on the head. All of these things are things that 100% are things that are going through our heads when we speak out. And I think the biggest one for me, or at least the one that I felt most pertinent to, is the fear of the unknown. The fact that I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if anything was going to happen or if my world would be turned upside down. The fear of not knowing really is terrifying to an athlete. And I think that's something we can actually stop through education and through all of that side of things. So absolutely, obviously the big word at the top, fear, really is the number one for me there. Wrongful allegation is an interesting one I find as well, because again, athletes don't necessarily, our job is to perform, is to be the best at what we do in the world. And it's not necessarily to know back to front all the anti-doping rules. Don't get me wrong, we should, but it's an unfortunate fact that not every athlete is completely versed in, in every single ADRV and clean sport education. So not knowing if you've seen something is scary in itself. You don't want to potentially ruin someone's career by, has what I've seen actually been allowed? If you don't know, that's something that's going to hold you back. So absolutely, that one came up a lot, which is an interesting one. Punishment is one that it didn't come up too much, but it's one that I felt particularly terrified about when I was going through it, because again, I didn't at the time have the level of knowledge that a lot of athletes have now, in the sense that have I done something wrong along the way that I could get punished for in this process? If they start investigating the entire team and team management, is there anything that I've inadvertently done? Am I going to get myself in trouble here? So that's absolutely something. Retaliation is an unfortunate one. It's hard seeing these things come up, because this is essentially what realistically you're going to be scared of is people standing up to you and saying, no, like it's not, you pushing back as to what you're saying. I would particularly like to say on this one, it's not something I actually experienced too much of. And if anything, it was the absolute opposite. Once I had spoken out about things, the support from particularly the athletes and some of the coaches as well was really positive. But absolutely, people are scared about it. It comes back to fearful of, what are people going to think? Are they going to try and destroy my career because I've tried to speak out and do the right thing? Social implication is also a massive one. As much as we like to think we don't care about what people think of us, inherently we do. And as athletes and as coaches and anyone in sport, really, our reputation is massive. Our careers rely on it, and it's the same in the business world and the social world. Absolutely, what people think of you is really quite important. You can sit there thinking to yourself, are these people going to hate me for trying to do the right thing? You don't know, and you feel you can be anxious about that. Absolutely, and it was interesting seeing how many people put that in the data as well, as the social implications and basically people being scared of what people might think. And I think probably 15 years ago, very, very valid point. Where we are now, we're certainly heading in the right direction. We're not quite there yet, don't get me wrong, but we're heading in the right direction there, which is really, really nice to see. The consequences, yeah. So I was terrified of this one as well. Would anyone want to employ me as an athlete after this? Is my career down the drain? And this is probably most athletes' fear, is losing funding or being cut from the national team or whatever it may be. But you don't know what those consequences are. And again, it's the fear of not knowing. It's the fear of, well, what is going to happen? Are there consequences? Are there not consequences? You don't know. And that's terrifying. And that kind of ties into the one down the bottom as well, which is obviously career. I think for, like I say, most athletes, this is the big one for them. If they've worked their entire life to getting to where they are now, to let's say they're 6 months out from the Olympics and they see something, are they really going to be willing to speak out about something if there's a potential that it could affect their career when they've spent the past 15 years building towards it? So those are a few of them, and obviously threat of harm or to self or others. Not something I've experienced, but absolutely, if there's certain parts of the world or certain sports where these things really aren't accepted, then of course people are going to be scared of that. But I think realistically, what we can see here is, although these are all completely valid reasons, they all tie into fear of the unknown, and fear of not really understanding what's next. So I think the best thing we can do moving forward really is try and fill in some of those blanks. I think that's the direction we're heading in now, I believe.
Absolutely. Thank you, Toby. Yeah, I think, as you said, I mean, it's all about fear, and then it's all perhaps about really just not knowing what to expect, not knowing the reception that you're going to get from other people. So that is quite a nice transition into looking at the second stream of today, which our goal was to provide a little bit more transparency around the proactive reporting from the organizational perspective. So I know that Nick has some things he wants to talk about in terms of how the system works, what happens to your information. So over to you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks again so much. If you can go to the next slide, I just want to rip through a few points from my perspective. And you might notice that we're actually trying to change the mindset from a whistleblower or an informant or something that has a bad connotation to proactive reporting. We're trying to change the mindset that it's more positive about that the person is proactively trying to proactively reporting into the ITA. And so this comes along with encouraging this reporting, that you're part of the solution and not the problem, as you said, those repercussions that somebody's going to be out for you or somebody's going to think of you differently. But we're trying to change that, Omerta, and trying to change how we can responsibly clean up the sport a little bit more. And that's one thing that I wanted to focus on for all of us that are involved in sport. Certainly the athletes and the support personnel, doctors, coaches, but there has to be that responsibility. You have to look at it as, if you don't do anything, the sport will continue to remain dirty or stay dirty or continue to slip into bad places. And so you have to take that responsibility somehow. And I know it's easier probably said than done, but we have to encourage those small pieces, those small steps. And we put it on a very simple, if you see something, say something about it. I think that nothing can be said more than every little piece of the puzzle matters for us to put all these bigger things together. And you all are experts in sports. You know what looks right and then what doesn't look right. You know when an athlete makes an incredible jump in performance. And maybe that's enough to spark somebody looking into it or taking a second examination of what might be behind it. But I put up on the screen a very interesting quote that I came across that I just wanted to read out a portion of it. Asking people to take responsibility in policing their own sport and accepting those consequences for such misconduct. If you can go to the next slide for me, please. What we do with the reporting that comes to us, and I know a lot of people are asking about, what happens to it, who's going to review it. And so I just wanted to put up a very few things. Again, we can talk about this for days on end. But we take a very human approach to this. Our experts, we're not the judges, we're not the jury. We take a very human approach to receiving your information. I'm not going to judge you if you accidentally did something wrong. We want to do it in a proactive way that we can focus on the welfare of athletes and how we can take the information forward. So there's no judgments. There's a very human understanding approach about what we're going to do. Again, all of the information is safeguarded by our ITA experts. We protect the source of the information. That's our primary focus. So any information that we do act, for example, if one athlete is in a room and it's only the athlete and the doctor injecting something into the athlete, we won't act on that immediately because that puts that athlete at risk once it's reported. We're going to find ways to act upon that information in a calm and sensible way. And one thing that's very interesting about what we're doing, we actually want to talk to people. We encourage people to write in and to report to us. We actually want to talk to you, the athlete support personnel, about what you're seeing, because we want you to have faith in what's happening in the sport. And again, we need to acknowledge this. Toby talked about not hearing anything for 6 months, and we need to be able to provide that feedback, provide what's happening with the reporting, and finishing with trust being the ultimate thing that we share between each other. And I just want to finish with one more, if you can go to the next slide. We're trying to, again, break down the barriers of reporting, and we're happy to announce that we're revamping the ITA's website related to Reveal and related to reporting. But this will be something that we send out as a information guideline. What does confidential mean, or what does anonymous mean? What can I report? Who am I reporting to? So there's some information that's available to you to better understand the process. And you'll see in the middle of the slide, there's 2 QR codes that are available to you, one to the reporting, web-based reporting, but you can also send us an anonymous email. And we're very pleased to announce that we've just launched a new anonymous WhatsApp messaging platform. So you type in the number or go to the ITA website and click on the reporting widget for WhatsApp. It immediately launches a chat function that's anonymous, and it's secured by a third party that provides this service to us. So we're trying to break down the reporting challenges, how many different screens you have to click on to get a report to us. And so I just wanted to finish with some of the things that we're doing on encouraging reporting.
Thank you, Nick. So hopefully we have now broken down some of the fears, perhaps talked about the fears, and talked about some of the organizational processes that are in place to protect people who do report the information. So on our next slide, we have all the solutions that were suggested by you in terms of how we can reduce some of the barriers, what we can do to promote a culture where people are willing, able, and confident to report information. So here's the summary of what your suggestions were. As you can see, there are many different ideas, although a lot of them do overlap and complement each other. And education was the most mentioned word, and I think close behind that were ensuring anonymity and raising awareness. So now we do have a poll question that I would like to launch just to inform our discussion over the last couple of minutes. And the question is for all of you to answer. It is anonymous, so please do get involved and put a vote in. So what is the next step in an athlete-centric approach to proactive reporting? So if we can launch the poll, the options that we have are more or different tools to proactively report. Can we put in place greater protection for proactive reporters? Do we need more education on the proactive reporting process? Do we need more education on identifying what to report? As we've kind of mentioned, it may or not always be straightforward or easy. Do we need to build more relationships with athletes to promote trust? Or the last option that you can have is, do we need to review the legal framework around this? So I know it is quite a big question, and perhaps a little bit of thought needs to be put into your response. So I am going to give a few more seconds for everyone to put their votes in. And as I said, we are coming to the end of our webinar time, so we'll probably be able to discuss the top answer and then move on to the live Q&A. Awesome. So we've hit just over 50% of you that have voted. So let's close the poll and share the results. And I'll ask Nick and Toby to turn their cameras back on to discuss the answer. So the most popular choice, I guess, is for more, or the next step is more education on the proactive reporting process. Toby, I guess coming to you first, would that have been your pick? Do you agree with that statement? And what do you see as, like, how do we do that from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, from my perspective, yeah, education on proactive reporting process. To me, that's probably the biggest one. As someone that's out in the field running a lot of the education, it's clear that a lot of athletes and a lot of athlete support personnel don't actually understand the process. And like I say, a lot of the fear around things is the not knowing. So for me, like obviously the majority of people here, that's a big one. But I can also see on there that there's working on relationships as well and building trust, which is, again, something I've touched on a little bit earlier in the session, as well as Nick. That's human relationships and understanding that there's a person at the end of that anonymous portal or whatever they may have used to do that. Understanding that it's, you know, it's not just a robot. It's not just someone that's going to spurt a pre-generated message. You know, that's really, really key. And to be honest, that kind of ties into actually educating about the process anyway. But yeah, humanizing is really, really important, I think. Anything else to add on that one, Nick?
I mean, I'm just overwhelmed by the fact that there's not a bad answer here. There's, you know, it just goes to show how much that we have to focus on all these different areas, and, you know, and so much to do, not only from the legal framework, protecting of protecting of reporting, proactively reporting persons, to understanding how the process goes. So it just goes again to our topic of so much more to do, and we look forward to further sessions on this.
Awesome. So thank you both. I know we do have a next slide on the legal framework, but we might pause on that. You will get a copy of the slides, and if you do have any questions or want to pick up the discussion, you're quite welcome to send us an email and we can pass it to Nick. So I just want to kind of close the loop before we go to our live Q&A, because I do see a couple of questions. So back to the moral dilemma, it does exist in a decision to proactively report. It's always going to exist to some extent. But I do hope that through today's session, we were able to address some of the barriers by breaking down the fears and providing confidence that concerns will be listened to and acted upon by some people that really care about athletes, about sport. So before we move to our live audience questions, I will just briefly introduce a slide of resources that we've put together for you. It includes a link to the ITA Proactive Reporting Platform Reveal, the World Anti-Doping Agency Speaking Up platform, and former webinars we've done on the topic. Some of the questions that came in through the registration were about building a program and about policy. So we didn't have time to look at this in detail, but we have linked resources for you here. So let's now go over to our live Q&A, and our first one, Dr. Ashim Bandari. Hello, how are you? And his question is, what happens if someone competing at the same position has bias to report the friends? So I'm guessing that's perhaps something to do with, or I'm interpreting that as, you know, are you perhaps reporting not because you've seen something, but because that's maybe some underlying reason other than that you might think you need to report? So Nick, did you interpret it the same, first of all, and then what would your response be?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to consider here in terms of reporting on teammates, reporting on somebody maybe that they're competing with, that if they report somebody, maybe they get the slot that qualifies. But there's also a potential fear of, well, I'm not sure what I saw. I don't want to be wrong. So I'm not going to report, right? But let us decide that, like, let the experts and analyze the information on its merits to determine if it was perhaps malicious and somebody's reporting for the wrong reasons, or if they're reporting in good faith. And that's what we want to really see, is that reporting in good faith.
Thank you. And so our next question from Dr. Ashcock. How can any organization protect the whistleblower as they are not able to maintain confidentiality and want the person as a witness and come to an investigating panel? And I know we've had discussions amongst the three of us about that, about how important anonymity and confidentiality is. So Nick, how does the system protect the person who's reported?
Yeah, and we deal with this situation all the time, and it's one of the most challenging, right? For anybody in law enforcement, there's a process of parallel reconstruction or parallelly constructing something. Instead of going straight to the line, I have to come at it from a different angle. And so instead of putting you, the proactive reporter, in the firing line, I want to try to get at that information in a different manner. And I think the heart of the question is not protecting the person when they have to then testify against their as an accuser against the people in court. And this is where we really have to look at legal frameworks and protections for potential, witness testimony, and look at, is it really important to expose the reporter in a court sense? I would want to look at this from a different angle of investigations. How else can we investigate this without exposing the reporter? So that's how I would really look at this process.
Thank you, Nick. And I just do see one more question that's popped up, and I do love questions, and so we're going to answer it today. So it's from Nima, and perhaps Toby, you could answer this one. So, is the proactive reporting only related to international athletes?
No, absolutely not. I think it's related to every level of sport. It's related to, right down to grassroots kind of thing. It starts at a young age, and it's something we have to build into culture from the very start of things. Yes, of course, inherently we'll experience a lot more reporting from an elite level. Inherently, we always will kind of have that side of things. Things are very serious at the top level of sport. But to build that into culture, that starts right at the, right where kids are starting into sport and ingraining this clean sport, the clean sport values into things right from the very beginning. And feeling comfortable being able to speak out about things is something you teach very early on. It's a big approach for us in terms from the education perspective. I teach a lot of junior events, purely on the fact they are extremely, they're taking on board information. They're willing to learn and be shaped as to what kind of athlete they're going to be. So that's a huge focus for us. It doesn't have to be the senior world championships. It can be right down the junior ranks to the national level. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And Nick, anything you want to add to Toby's comment? Or do you think he did a very good job of covering it all?
Great job covering it. And clearly, we need to do another webinar on this because we're running out of time. And I think that everybody wants to discuss this even more. So I look forward to us convening again with this great session to discuss these matters.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you, everyone. This does wrap up today's webinar. If you do have any more questions at any point, you can email us education@ita.sport. A big thank you to our panelists, Toby and Nick, and a big thank you to all of you for joining us today. Our next month's webinar will be on supplements, so please do join us for that. Registrations will be open very soon. And finally, if you would like to receive updates from the ITA, perhaps including Nick's new infographic on the Reveal platform and how you can access it, then you can sign up using the link that you'll find on the slide. So thank you all once again, and we wish you a great rest of your day.